I'm Paul Grand. I'm CEO here at MedTech Innovator. Welcome to our MedTech Innovator 2021 info session. Today, we're going to be discussing MedTech Innovator. I'm going to tell you all about our program. I'm going to tell you a little bit about our history and why we exist. I'm going to talk to you about some of the things that you can expect during MedTech Innovator. And most importantly, I'm going to answer your questions. That's the intent of today's session, is to answer questions. A couple of ways in which you can interact with me. If you're here on Zoom, you can use the little buttons at the bottom of the screen to queue up a question for me. There's two different ways of doing that. There's the chat and there's the Q&A button. The chat button you can click. If there's a quick question that you want me to clarify something mid-sentence, I'm happy to look down at chat. I will be looking at it throughout this whole discussion. And if I see something there, I'll try and respond to it quickly. If you have a question for the Q&A, which will largely be after I finish my main presentation, you should put that in the Q&A box. So just click the little Q&A button, type in your question. I will be monitoring that as well. And I'll watch that for questions, and I'll try again to get to every single one of those. I'm sure there will be plenty of those given what we've done in the past in these sessions. So briefly, I'm just going to introduce myself. I'm Paul Grand. I'm the CEO at MedTech Innovator. For those of you who aren't familiar with MedTech Innovator, I'm going to tell you a lot about that. But as in terms of myself, I'm an entrepreneur in terms of my training. Started 8 different companies myself. Then I went on to join a venture capital firm called RCT Ventures, where I spent 12 years as a life science venture capitalist. Following that, I started MedTech Innovator. And MedTech Innovator, we began as a program that was designed to help innovators because I saw this incredible need for solving a problem that I've seen in the overall landscape, no matter where it is, whether it's in California or Singapore or San Francisco, in particular cities, or Kansas, it doesn't really matter. We see the same issue, which is that regional ecosystems are typically not equipped to support healthcare innovators. And as a result, as I would go out as an investor and look at companies, I found myself often saying things like, wow, I really wish I'd met that company 6 months ago or a year ago. I really could have given them some feedback that would have made that company more investable, but I can't invest today. And as I talked to my colleagues at companies like Johnson & Johnson and others, they would say the same thing. They would say, yeah, we saw some deal, was super exciting, but ultimately we had to pass because there was some fundamental flaw. Ironically, had we met that company earlier, we could have corrected it. So we created MedTech Innovator as an entity that would solve that problem. So when I think of MedTech Innovator, ultimately what I want you to understand is that this is a program that has been designed for you from the very beginning. Its intent is to make great startups succeed. And I say that because there are lots of great startups out there that are going to fail, and for the wrong reason. And we do not want to see that happen. Over there in the corner, you can see the @MedTech Awards hashtag for Twitter and the hashtag MedTech Innovator for LinkedIn. If you want to screenshot something from today and put it on those social media, that would be just fine with me. All right. So again, what I want to impart upon you about MedTech Innovators is that first and foremost, we are a nonprofit. We are global in scale. We are not regionally bound by anyone. There's no local funding source that says, oh, you have to accelerate startups in Los Angeles or anywhere else, although we'd love to find some in our backyard here in Los Angeles. That's not what we're looking for. We are looking to find startups, the best startups all over the world, and scale-ups, not just startups, that are focused on medical technology. So by that, I mean medical devices, digital health, diagnostic, and so on, including life science tools, and increasingly other areas that kind of cross over a bit, even into feeling like biopharma, things like polymers and other drug delivery technologies. We want to find the best of those entities, the best of those companies, the best technologies, and we want to make sure those technologies reach patients. What you're looking at here on the screen is the graduating class of MedTech Innovator 2019. I'm showing you this one because it was in person, and a little more fun to look at than just the typical Zoom style screen. But what you're looking at is the graduating class of 2019. And behind them are the products that have been brought to market by their predecessors. We're very excited about that. That's something we're very good at. MedTech Innovator at this point has 339 alumni companies in our portfolio who have brought 74 products to the market. That is pretty staggering when you think about it. Typically, if you were to look at an accelerator, you might find one company that's made it to the market from a particular class. But that is not the case here at MedTech Innovator. Our cohorts have been incredibly productive. They've raised over $2 billion in follow-on equity funding after MedTech Innovator. We've had over 4,000 companies apply over the years. This was our 8th year in 2000 in operation. 2021 will be our 9th year in operation. And on an annual basis, we have hundreds of reviewers and judges and mentors who participate in our program. And the key there is that these are not just the best ones that we could find in our local ecosystem. These are the best ones in the world. And you're going to have a chance to work with them if you're accepted to MedTech Innovator. We also give out prizes as part of our program. So we give out non-dilutive funding. We don't take equity in our companies. All of this is done in the form of grants. So we give out prizes every single year. We also give out incubator space. On an annual basis, we'll now give out close to $1 million between our US and Asia Pacific programs and the different prizes and awards. We've had 11 acquisitions as well, so pretty successful. Now, we don't do this on our own. We do this as a partnership with the industry, and that's very important to understand. MedTech Innovator is not about, again, accelerating people with ideas who want to start a company. We are about supporting companies that are on the path, that are up and running, that have technology, that probably have prototypes, and sometimes even evidence in the form of either strong preclinical data or clinical data. And you're on your way. You've got your team, you've got some limited funding, whether it's non-dilutive funding or some small seed funding. You're up and running, and we don't want to see you fail. So what we've done is we've come together with leading players in the industry in something that's akin to like a corporate accelerator. I'd call it a light corporate accelerator at best. But the idea is that you're going to work directly with the people on this screen. They're not just going to pop in for a quick feedback session and a demo day. You're going to get to work with these companies, the ones that you see here on the screen all year long. So that's the key, that you will be working directly with the leadership of our industry. They will be traveling with us if we're there in person, or if we're on Zoom, they'll be meeting with you in Zoom. But either way, you're going to get a chance to work with people like this. A question in the chat just now asking if the companies have traction like revenue, or can they apply beforehand before they go to market? And the answer is yes, you may absolutely apply even without revenue. What we're looking for is just some evidence that supports your abilities to succeed. And that evidence might be customer validation, where you've actually deployed or done pilots. It might be just key stakeholders that you've talked to who've given you really strong feedback. It might just be you, the founder, who's a clinician, and you have observed this problem yourself, and you know that it needs to be solved, and you've got some evidence to support that. Whatever it might be, we're happy to have you apply even without revenue. Most of our companies are not revenue generating. I mentioned a minute ago about wanting to prevent startups from failing. So we published an article earlier this year in 2020 in Stat News called 10 Reasons Why Healthcare Startups Fail. We do not want to see you fail for the wrong reason. And unfortunately, that's the majority of the reasons why startups fail. In healthcare, it's not because of technology risk that's causing a problem or technology failure. Ultimately, it's something else, usually a lack of capital. And unfortunately, all too often, it's companies getting bad advice. I've now looked personally at over 10,000 companies in my career. I've met with thousands of innovators in person, sitting side by side with some of the strategics and others that I mentioned to you earlier. And we look at these companies and we talk to them and we give feedback. And the common phrase I hear from startups is, huh, no one's ever told me that before. And unfortunately, that's usually because you're in a local ecosystem somewhere where people give you a lot of applause, a lot of pat in the back, and they don't tell you the truth, or they're not equipped to tell you the truth about the issues you're going to face as you try to scale outside your local ecosystem. Some of the reasons why startups fail are on this slide. I'm not going to go into all these right now, but I encourage you to look this article up because we did go into some good detail on not only the problems, but how you can solve them. So that is something that I encourage you to do. And again, the number one thing that I want you to do is get out of your echo chamber. That's point number 10. We want to get you out of that local ecosystem and in front of a national ecosystem who can help you. I'm going to give a little more information on the program, then I'll answer some of the other questions that are in the chat. One of the things that you should know is that this is super competitive. We had over 1,000 applications to MedTech Innovator last year, and that's not to discourage you from applying. That's to encourage you, to let you know that we are highly competitive, that if we do select you, it's because you are the best of the best. And frankly, don't you want to know if you're the best of the best? So please apply. Out of the companies that apply, we will invite at least 200 companies to pitch us in our US program and probably about another 100 companies to pitch us in our Asia Pacific program. So globally, there'll be about 300 companies invited to pitch as part of the 2021 program. In the US, we'll select 50 companies to be part of what we call our overall showcase. That means we're going to present you to the industry and to our partners. About half of those, maybe a little more, this year it was 30, were part of our US Accelerator program. So all these companies, the 50 showcase companies, are startups and scale-ups of varying sizes. The accelerator companies tend to be earlier stage. And by that, I mean companies that have generally raised up to a Series A. Those are typically the companies that are part of our accelerator. Companies in our overall pool will range from seed rounds or non-dilutive grant funding rounds, all the way up to like a Series C in fundraising. We have companies in our showcase that have raised $30 million or $40 million. They're there because they want visibility and access to the industry. So we encourage you, whether you're a startup or a scale-up, to apply. Ultimately, we choose finalists in both our US and our Asia Pacific programs. The finalists will compete in our competitions at the very end for the grand prizes. But you should know that although there's one grand prize winner, we will give out awards to usually around 10 companies out of the program. Depending on the year, sometimes the same company will win multiple awards. We have multiple competitions, multiple opportunities to win. But ultimately, the cash prizes, as our alumni will tell you, are really just kind of the icing on the cake. The program itself is the prize. So again, to clarify the question in the box, the accelerator companies are a subset of our showcase. We're not filtering companies out. They're all part of the showcase pool. Everybody will be accelerated. The big difference between what we call accelerator and showcase is corporate mentorship. The accelerator companies get the dedicated corporate mentors who they meet with every couple of weeks and other mentors. The showcase companies get all the same resources except for the corporate mentorship. And I'll talk more about resources in a little bit. There was a question about whether or not European companies can apply, or if this is only for US and APAC. To clarify that, MedTech Innovator is global in scale, and the two programs we offer, or really three now, are focused on the US, meaning companies that want to deploy in the US as their primary market. The Asia Pacific program is for companies that are focused on APAC for their first market. They may still want to deploy in the US or Europe, but Asia Pacific is their primary market, and those should apply to the Asia Pacific program. So if you're based in Europe and you're going to be marketing in Europe, but you certainly want to access the US market in a big way, the US program is probably where you want to apply. There are also companies in Latin America who apply to our program. You're welcome to apply to the US program. You're welcome to apply to the Asia Pacific program. Wherever your primary market is, that's where you should apply. There are companies in Japan who apply to our US program, or Singapore, or Australia. There are companies in the US who apply to our Asia Pacific program, and more importantly, are selected for those programs. So your geography does not limit you as to where you can apply. All right. So very quickly, one of the questions is how we evaluate companies. That is super important because, ultimately, as I said, we're looking at companies that are all the way from the seed stage up through like a Series C. How do you apples to apples compare those kinds of companies? Well, frankly, you can't compare them in a totally apples to apples way, but I'm going to give you a little bit of information on how we evaluate companies in 3 different categories. And this is the way we look at companies, not only during our initial review process, but also all the way through our program. So we begin with value. If you don't know how to articulate your value, that was one of my reasons why healthcare startups fail that I mentioned in the article we wrote earlier. If you can't articulate your value proposition, you will not succeed in healthcare. You won't raise funding, you won't secure partnerships, you won't get customers, and ultimately you won't get market share. You have to be able to articulate your value proposition. Now, look, I know lots of people might raise their hand and go, wait a second, but you're talking about value-based care. Well, ultimately, it's really all about value-based care, with the exception of consumer plays. And of course, that is a little bit different. But specifically in terms of value, we want to make sure that you understand the key stakeholders who your product offers value to. We want you to understand what the value proposition is. Now, you may not know all the answers to these questions on day one, but we will certainly work with you throughout our program to perfect those. Ultimately, we really like companies with patient benefit. We want you to be patient-centered. If you're not patient-centered in the way you're thinking, the likelihood is you, again, will not succeed in today and tomorrow's healthcare system. We want to understand your competitive differentiation. We'll look at a company and we'll go, oh, this is nice. The 20th company we've seen for sterilizing catheter connections, or the 30th company we've seen who's developed a system for coaching people with diabetes. At the end of the day, we're really happy you're developing these technologies and these innovations, but you really better be differentiated if you want to scale beyond your local KOLs, beyond your local ecosystem. So it's very important that you understand your competitive differentiation, not just locally, but nationally and internationally. Again, you may not have all the answers to these questions, but we're certainly going to help you and ask you questions about that. So that's really important. And ultimately, the market opportunity is one last thing I'll touch on. You do not have to be a multi-billion-dollar opportunity for us to be interested in your company. As long as you serve a patient with a very, very compelling value proposition and an unmet need, we're going to be interested. Whether that market is $50 million or $2 billion, we really don't care. If you offer value, we're interested in talking to you. The next category related to execution. So look, we know you may not have the perfect team, but you better have a team. We want to make sure that you have the ability to execute during our program. That's what this whole center column is really about. It's execution. It's very important to us that you have the resources to execute, at least on the milestones that you've identified for accomplishing during our program. That is very important. If you don't have the resources to execute and we give you a lot of guidance, it's kind of a waste of our time and a waste of your time. So again, that is super important. It's something that we want to make sure you understand. You need to have a team that's at least dedicated to work on this project. This can't be something where you say, well, if we get funding, then we're going to work on this technology. You're too early for MedTech Innovator. We want to make sure you have people who are focused to work on the opportunity. Now, that doesn't mean you can't have other jobs. Some of our best companies are companies that come from a single founder with a great support system, and they spend their time with us perfecting their plan, looking for other members to join their team. That's just fine. We understand you're still a surgeon, you're still a clinician, whatever it might be. So that's just fine. We want to make sure that ultimately, again, you have the resources to execute during our program. If you can't take an hour a week to attend our webinars, and if you can't take an extra hour to talk to a mentor during the week, so you don't have 2 hours a week, then you don't have enough time for MedTech Innovator. Okay, now again, that's the accelerator. If you're showcase only, we're mainly looking for you to be there to join in as you're available. We're going to give you opportunities. If you don't use those opportunities to your advantage, well, that's up to you. We're more focused in the showcase section on showcasing you to investors, to strategics, to the industry, again, giving you all the resources that I'm talking about, but it's up to you in terms of how much you use those resources. And then lastly, momentum. What I'll mention here is that what we look for in terms of evaluation are companies that are at a stage in which they are developing their technology. They're not just having an idea. We want to assess how quickly you're getting to milestones, how quickly you can achieve things, how quickly you can scale. And again, that's not to say that we wouldn't consider a company that is a PMA with 7 years to go. That's just fine. But we want to see some milestones we can help you achieve. Again, that will help us in terms of our selection. If you don't have a milestone for a long time, it doesn't mean you're out of the game. It just means you're less likely to be selected. Customer validation, that's terrific if you have that, even if it's just stakeholders, but ultimately, if you have some customers, some pilots, some traction, that would be terrific, but it's not a requirement. But it certainly will give you a check in the momentum box. So that's it. And again, runway is very important. You want to make sure that you have an expectation and understanding of how long you can last without additional capital. Now, we're going to help you raise capital, but if you say, hey, I run out of money in 3 months, again, there's probably not that much we can do for you other than maybe make some introduction. So you're probably not right for our program. Question from the box. Do you allow your companies to participate in 2 accelerators simultaneously as long as they can honor the time commitment? Absolutely. We have many companies in MedTech Innovator that are participating in multiple accelerators. And what you should know is that we are different than other accelerators. We're focused on something a little bit different. I mentioned a second ago that one of the things that I think really differentiates us at MedTech Innovator is that we are focused on, I would say, much more of the product and not so much the individual. Now, that doesn't mean we won't support you as an innovator. We will. But I want to make sure you understand that we know other accelerators out there do focus on the individual and do spend a lot of time coaching you on how to hire people and how to recruit a board and how to write a business plan or how to build a pitch deck. We're not going to teach you how to build a pitch deck at MedTech Innovator. However, we will give you some unbelievable coaching on your existing pitch deck. And we will help you turn that into an award-winning and fundraising pitch deck. So we're not focused on you as a person and trying to just coach you. We're focused on making sure your product offers value and that it's going to succeed in the market. And by the way, that it will succeed regardless of whether or not you're the CEO. Oftentimes, the founding team isn't ultimately the team that brings the product to market. We want to make sure this thing has a life even beyond you as an innovator. So again, yes, you may participate in multiple accelerators. It's not so much that we encourage it because we want you focused on your product, but if you are in multiple accelerators, that's just fine with us. All right, back to the presentation. So moving on. Some key dates for you to be aware of. Now, these dates are heavily, I would say, heavily focused on around an end date. So you understand kind of why we do this. At the end of our program, our US companies will be showcased in one of 2 large conferences. In the US program, meaning again, companies that are focused on the US market, we will showcase you at the MedTech conference. That is AdvaMed, AdvaMed's conference. AdvaMed is the trade association for all the major MedTech companies in our industry. It's where people get together to solve problems together as an industry. They're the ones who set policy. They're the ones who lobby Washington to change regulation to make sure that you're going to be more successful. Every company selected for our accelerator is automatically made a member of AdvaMed. We want to make sure you have a chance to participate with the other members of AdvaMed. So you'll be showcased at the AdvaMed conference at the end of our program, which is currently scheduled for September 27th through 29th in Minneapolis. Now, we all know we're in a pandemic and things may change this year. As far as we know, there's going to be a lot of vaccination happening over the course of the middle of this year. And we're hoping that we get to do all these things in person. Of course, we're all prepared for a fully virtual program if need be. But again, the end of the program right now is scheduled for the end of September. In our Asia Pacific program, it's very similar. We work with an organization called APAC Med. APAC Med is the trade association for companies and also regional trade associations all across Asia Pacific. Going from Australia Pacific, Australia, New Zealand, and Asia Pacific, all the way over to China and everything in between. When we look at Asia, that is a big territory. APAC Med really helps us navigate that landscape for all the different regulatory challenges and things that you're going to find. Everything in our program leads up to that date. Again, in APAC Med, they're going to have their meeting at the end of the year, I believe in October. So everything leads up to that. Our applications are open right now. They close on January 15th. So we want to make sure you get your application in as soon as possible. I can't say that enough, as soon as possible. And the reason I say that is we want to make sure that we have time to select companies for our pitch events. Now, even though I've talked about vaccination, I fully expect that our pitch events will all be virtual in the months of February through April when we have our virtual pitch events. These will be thematic in nature. We're going to be specifically looking at the opportunity to have companies pitch us in a category. And what's so important about that is that you have, if you think about it, this amazing resource to sit down and meet with investors, strategics, and others. I'll talk about that more in a moment. We want to make sure that we have the right experts in the room. Typically, we have something like 70 to 100 judges at our virtual pitch events. We invite 15 companies to present at each one of these events. And you'll have a chance to sit down and talk with, as I said, strategics in the industry focused on that space, investors who are focused on that space, clinicians, other providers, payers, perhaps members of the FDA or CMS who reimburses and pays for products. Other private payers will attend these events. And ultimately, you'll have an opportunity to pitch people and get feedback from people at these virtual events, regardless of whether or not we ultimately select you for our program. So the key is we want to make sure that we have plenty of time between now and our first pitch event to start selecting companies. The earlier you apply, the better chance you will have of being selected. If you apply at the very end on January 15th, which about half the companies do every year, the likelihood that we're going to select you for that first pitch event is going to be marginally lower. So very important that you apply as soon as you can. And we'll talk more about the application shortly. Midway through the program in May, we'll start selecting companies and notifying them. And the program itself begins in June. It will run for approximately 4 months until the conferences that I mentioned earlier. And depending on how things go with the pandemic, some of this will be in a hybrid format. Some of this will be in person. We'll have to see. As I said, these things are all still kind of up in the air. So we'll get to that. Okay. So I'm going to answer a break here for 1 second to answer a couple of questions that I see in the Q&A and I see in the chat, and then we'll keep going with my presentation. So there's a question over here. Do you allow, can applications be updated as new relevant information becomes available between now and January 15th? Absolutely. So our system, which I'm going to show you in a moment, allows you to submit submit your application. We may respond to you with questions if there are things that we see that are missing, but you'll be able to keep updating the information all the way until January 15th. There's a submit button in the application that lets you submit it. That tells us you're done, but you can still go back and edit the application. If you have some update, you just raise more funding, you change your plan, you decided instead of your primary indication that you thought you were going to do, you're changing your mind, that's fine. Go in and change it in the application. We'll have a notification that you did that. So that's super important, and something that we encourage you to do is keep updating. But again, fill it out as soon as possible, submit it as soon as possible so we know that you're done. Okay, a couple other questions over here in Q&A. Is the program open to companies with CEOs who are not founders? Absolutely. We love companies that have taken the step to find somebody else who wants to carry on with their vision and execute on it, who has hopefully the experience to do so. Now, I will warn you that what we are not looking for is for, a real estate investor who really knows business, who says, hey, I love your technology to diagnose infection, and I know it's a real problem. I want to be your CEO. That's probably not the best CEO for your company. You want someone who understands how to run a healthcare company. Now, again, you might have an early CEO who says, look, it's my first gig. I just was an engineer up until now, and now I'm ready to be a CEO, but I know I may not have all the experience to take this company all the way. That's fine too. We just want the right CEO for the right time. Okay, there was a question from Andy, which I'm going to ask you to clarify, Andy, which is what category are you looking for? If you're looking for technology categories, I can answer that, but maybe you can clarify that in the chat box. I'm also going to talk about a page on our website that has all of our areas of interest. So we'll talk about that in a minute. Okay. Now, there was one more question that someone asked. Can you add updates until the May selection deadline? Yes, you can do that as well. What we mean by that is you've submitted your application. We're selecting companies. It's a month later. It's February now. And we have pitch events that are going to be coming up in April or maybe even early May. And we say, all right, we're reviewing applications for that event. We're going back through them. It is a living system. At any time, you can go in and edit that application, and you will not miss out on having new information presented. We don't want to have old information from 5 months ago that we're making decisions on. So we encourage you to keep updating that information. All right, back to the presentation. So last couple of slides here, just to give you a visual. When the program starts off, it's either going to be on Zoom or it'll be in person, probably Zoom, let's be honest. And it's a virtual program. We've been running a virtual program for 6 years. We really know what we're doing with a virtual program. Although we ask everybody to fly out if it's an in-person program. We have everybody fly out at the beginning of the program for our MedTech Innovator Summit. And then we fly out everybody again, or they fly out to wherever our finals are. As I mentioned, whether that's in the US program, which is in Minneapolis this year, or Asia Pacific, where it will be in Singapore. We want you to all get together in person if we can. If it's not safe to do so, it will be hybrid or virtual. The summit, however, whether it's in person or virtual, we get together all the companies. This year we did it on Zoom, and everybody gets to know each other and understands how to work together, because frankly, the most important thing you're going to get out of MedTech Innovator is the peer network. All the resources I'm talking about, super awesome. They'll be amazing for you. However, the peer network is unparalleled. We have 340 companies in our portfolio, the largest portfolio in the entire world. We're the largest accelerator, the largest life science accelerator in the world. And those companies, 95% of them are still in business. I'll say it again, 95% of the 340 companies we've been working with now since 2013 are still in business. 85% of them have raised equity financing. So these are super high performing, successful companies that you want to know and work with. These are the people that you're going to get to sit shoulder to shoulder with as you solve problems. So we want to make sure you have an access to an incredible peer network, as well as incredible investors and others who are aligned with you to bring these products to market. So that's what we do during the summit. We'll also have the conference at the end of the program. So these are some screenshots from 2 years ago at the MedTech conference, again, because the virtual program isn't as much fun to look at on the screen. But the MedTech conference, whether it's virtual or in person, is unbelievable in terms of being value added. This year it starts September 27th in Minneapolis. What you're looking at there on the left-hand side at the bottom of the screen is the MedTech Innovator Showcase. So every one of the companies we select for that showcase, this year in the US program, there are actually 62 companies because we also have a pediatric program I'm going to talk about shortly. All of those companies were showcased at the MedTech conference, and you see the crowd of people there to listen to the presentations. It's an amazing opportunity to be showcased. You also get a chance to network with all the leadership of the industry. You'll be there with the CEOs of companies large and small. So whether there are other small companies like yours, or whether they're large companies like Johnson & Johnson, or Baxter, or Edwards Life Sciences, and others, you're going to have a chance to sit there as peers and talk about issues in the industry, to share advice, experience, resources, etc. And as I mentioned, there are competitions. So MedTech Innovator ends its program with a series of competitions. This year we had 4 of them only a couple weeks ago. The way the program works is we're constantly mentoring startups. Our corporate partners and others are constantly engaged with our startups, and they will come to us and say, hey, I think this company is terrific. They should be in this competition. Whether it's our value competition, which recognizes companies with the most compelling value propositions, our execution competition for companies that are executing the best, our finals competition for companies that are checking all those boxes and then some in terms of momentum. We will choose companies to compete in front of the industry audience. Thousands of people will have a chance to see you. And most importantly, the industry is the one who chooses the winner, not us at MedTech Innovator. We select the companies that make it into the competitions, and then we leave it to the industry to vote. This year, the winner at MedTech Innovator received a $350,000 first prize. That's a company called Rayos, based in Illinois, that's developing a hydrocephalus monitor that is completely wearable, that is disposable, and will radically transform the lives of patients with hydrocephalus and the people caring for those patients. So it's not just about the patient, but also the families. If these are children and the parents are sitting around every time that kid has a headache, and they're worried that they may have a leak in their, or a blockage in their hydrocephalus shunt, and they have to take them to the hospital for imaging and take them out of school and leave their job and all that stuff, you can understand how transformative a little thing about the size of a Band-Aid on your neck can be. That's what won MedTech Innovator this year. We had companies with heart valve technology in MedTech Innovator this year, complex systems. We had companies with, extremely well thought out systems that are, that are very involved. But ultimately, the companies that win don't necessarily have to be the $2 billion company. The companies that win may just serve a very compelling patient need. Forest Devices, who you see here on the screen, developed a device, a portal device that can go into any ambulance that can be used to triage patients with stroke into the appropriate care facility. And as many of you know, time is brain, and we got to make sure that these patients get diagnosed early. So they developed a disruptive technology that will save lives. And again, that's what we're after here at MedTech Innovator. All right, so that was my last slide. Last thing I will mention, and I'm going to open it up for Q&A now again, is that MedTech Innovator has no application fee. We do not take equity for your participation in the program. We are a nonprofit funded by the industry and funded by many of the federal agencies to specifically accelerate innovation. What we do is we partner with not only the industry, but also federal agencies like the FDA. So FDA supports us as part of a pediatric program that we run. So it's called the National Capital Consortium for Pediatric Device Innovation, or NCCPDI for short. We work together with NCCPDI as part of that consortia to select companies to compete in a special pediatric competition. And then those companies get to be in their own dedicated competition. Even though they're part of our overall accelerator, they also get special pediatric resources, their own competition, their own $250,000 in prizes that are completely separate from our main program. Those will be part of our program as well. We're an accelerator for Barda. If you're not familiar with Barda, this is an agency that has basically been stood up to fight the pandemic, to fight, to diagnose and to treat and to scale solutions related to health security threats, whether they're natural or man-made. So if it's a bioterrorism threat, if it's a nuclear attack, that falls under this as well. if you have a technology relating to diagnosing infection, to monitoring COVID patients at home, to treating people with COVID, or any infectious disease for that matter, Barda will be interested in you, and we will be as well. So we work closely with Barda. We're a Barda Accelerator, and our job is to find innovations related to health security, developing what we call medical countermeasures. So again, these are resources we have to give to you. If you're a company that is in a particular space, like you're like, hey, I've got a lung cancer diagnostic. We might say, hey, yeah, that's pretty cool for lung cancer, but you can also apply that same technology to patients with COVID. And you should apply to Barda. And guess what? Barda is giving you, might give you a contract, not just a grant. They might give you a contract for hundreds of thousands of dollars. They're giving millions and billions of dollars out to fight the pandemic, to diagnose, to treat, to scale companies in that space. So again, that's just another area that we'll bring to you as a resource, just to give you, again, a small taste of who you'll be talking to. You will be talking with people from the FDA. You'll be talking with people. We have a cybersecurity webinar coming up on Thursday of this week with the FBI. We want to make sure that you're learning from the people who are most equipped to help you understand a particular issue. So the webinar we have coming up this week, if you're a healthcare innovator, you should join our webinar. I'll give you a little taste of what our program is like. You can learn about that at medtechinnovator.org/live. That's our webinar series page, and you can join in and ask questions to the FBI and to the experts who we're going to have from Irdetto and others who are there to talk about cybersecurity threats that you should be aware of as it relates to your healthcare technology. And that's everything from like the WannaCry attacks, where people try to extort money from you, to IP theft, where they'll try and steal your intellectual property and more. We don't want you failing because you've got some great technology and someone stole it and now you can't compete. Again, these are the resources we want to bring to you. All right, so questions. I've got about 15 minutes left. If you want to put questions into the Q&A box or into the chat box, I'm staring at those two screens and I'm happy to answer any questions that you guys have. So please go ahead and put the questions in those boxes. If you want to ask me live, I'll even promote you to be a panelist and you can ask me your question live during this discussion on screen. You don't just have to type them in. All right, while I'm waiting for some more questions to come in, I'm going to talk about some of the other topics that you need to know about. Most importantly, I'm going to show you our application and how that works. So I'm going to screen share in 1 second. There's a question that says, how much weight do you give to certain criteria for pre-seed, seed stage companies versus a Series A? We do not weight you differently, whether you're seed or whether you're Series A or even later. We will evaluate you on your merits. You can be a B round company that still, hasn't achieved milestones that allow us to evaluate you, or you could be a seed company with products on the market. There's lots of variation out there, so we do not weight people differently based on the amount of funding. We just want to make sure you have funding to execute. Another question. I'm interested in applying as a company for the pediatric program. Is there a specific way to indicate that in the application? Yes. So as I bring up the application now, I'm going to show you what that looks like and how to apply to our program. So what you're looking at here on the screen right now is a page that you would be taken to after you register for an account. So if you come to MedTech Innovator's website, here I'll even log out. Actually, I won't for time. You go to MedTech Innovator's website. At the top, it will say log in here. There's also something that says US program, Asia program. The first thing I encourage you to do is go to the About menu. Under the About menu, the second item here says MedTech Innovator Strategic Interest Areas 2021. If you click that, that will bring up and answer the question that someone asked earlier, which is what we're looking for categorically. So what you see here is not an exhaustive list, meaning that you can apply with any technology in healthcare. We'll take a look at it. But the things you see here on the screen are things that our partners have asked for. And as a hint, since our partners are going to be the ones to choose you ultimately for participation, if you don't see your technology here, it doesn't mean they're not interested. It just means if you see your technology here, you should really speak to that particular area because this is what our partners are looking for. So you'll see this in many different areas that we cover. So, it's not just technology for treating somebody, it's also workflow optimization, for example, or imaging. We also are interested in technologies for Barda. I mentioned that earlier, pandemic and health security innovation. There's details here about that. We also do some hunting for the military. So for the US Army in particular, we have a list of areas that the US military is interested in here on this page. So again, if your company actually addresses these areas, you'll want to talk about it more in your application. Once you register for our website, you're going to click the login link, which will be where it says log out right now since I'm logged in. You can either go to our US program to the information and apply link. That will give you the information about our US program. Same thing for the Asia Pacific program. There's also an FAQ. This will tell you all about the program and the key dates, who the sponsors are. There's some videos to watch. Tells you about the benefits, etc. The eligibility requirements. And at the bottom, it says apply now. Since we're already logged in, it says you're already registered, way to go. If you weren't logged in, it would give you the information on how to register for an account. Then it says complete your application. And you click where it says submit an application. This will take you to the member homepage, which is where you'll be coming back every time you're part of, every time you come to our website. When you log in, it will take you here. On this page, it will tell you details about our program. Right now, all it has is the general banner at the top. The first thing you do when you register for an account is you fill out a page about yourself. So it's your name, your address, etc. It's what we call our Innovator Profile. So it's right here. So you put your contact information, the locality of where you're based, your LinkedIn profile is super helpful. We actually look at those. A little summary on you. It's very important. We want to know about you. Down here, you really don't have to change anything else down here unless you want to be a mentor or reviewer, which is probably not the audience for today's webinar. So then you just click submit. That will take you to the next page, which is the company information. The company information looks a lot like the last page, but I assure you it is different. So you want to fill that out with information about your company. So again, the name of your company, the year you were founded, your head count. We want to know how many people you have on staff, full-time or part-time. We want to know your phone number, your website. If you're on Twitter, please tell us that. Crunchbase, AngelList, these are all things that just give us more information. So you can supply that as well. Then we want to know your contact information for your CEO. Now, the person filling this out is often somebody else. It could be an assistant. It could be one of the founders. We want to know who the CEO is. That's very important. If you're a single one-person company, give us the information there. If you don't even have a CEO and you have someone who's kind of serving as that, that's fine. We just want to know who the primary contact will be. So please put that information here where it says CEO contact details. We need to be able to reach that person. Company headquarters location, we want to know where you're based. Again, you submit at the bottom. That will take you back to that member homepage. Then you'll see something that looks like this. We encourage you to add your profile picture because we want to recognize you when we have a chance to actually meet you. So please add your profile picture. If there's any other employees in your organization who will help you filling out this application or are going to contribute to the application in any way, you can click this button to add them as employees. All you'll do when you do that is it'll bring you to a page where you add their email address, their first name and last name, and submit, and they will be sent an email that all they have to do is click, and they will have access to this exact same information. So very important. Then the next step is that you're going to, and again, you can always go back and edit your information later, but then you're going to start an application. If you've previously applied with us, if you were here, applied last year, or the year before that, you will see your old application at the bottom, and you can actually view it to copy and paste information. We encourage you to open the application in another browser tab, and then you can just copy and paste information as relevant. But we don't want you to just copy and paste the same entire application. We want to know what's new. So please, if you've already applied before, tell us. I encourage you to apply multiple times, even if you've been rejected in the past. Our sponsors and our partners change every year. Their interests change every year, and you change every year. We have companies that have applied 3 years in a row to MedTech Innovator before we accepted them. We have companies that have applied 3 years, and they ultimately won in the 4th year the entire competition. So do not think that because you've applied in the past and we've rejected you that we're not interested. All right, I'm going to look at the application real quick. And if you have other questions, please supply them. Oh, there's a lot of questions here. Are you interested in companies in the middle of applying for an EUA? Absolutely. We love EUAs. If you don't have an EUA or know what one is, we'll help you apply for one. Emergency use authorization. Yes. Can you repeat the address to view your webinars? medtechinnovator.org/live. That is our address, medtechinnovator.org/live. Are software development companies, not medical device, welcome as well? Absolutely. We love software companies. Sometimes software companies have raised $0 because the founding team is working for free. That's fine too. We want to make sure that you are developing an innovation that's going to help patients or help transform how care is delivered. So please, if you're a software company, do apply. Would previous funding still be a prerequisite if the company is making some revenue to maintain itself? No, we do not need you to have raised funding to be part of MedTech Innovator. We do need you to have the resources to execute. So if you're totally revenue based at this point, if you've just kind of bootstrapped and you've got money that you've gotten from customers, fantastic. We would love that. That is just fine. Another question, are applications reviewed by those with domain expertise, strategic interest, or is it randomly assigned? It is assigned based on interests that our reviewers have. Our reviewers fill out a special form in our system that mirrors your application. And then based on that, we send applications to reviewers who match up with you. So yes. And one of the really cool things, by the way, is we've had companies contact us and say, hey, I know you didn't even select me to pitch, but I just want to let you know that I just got funding from somebody who reviewed us as part of your application process. Thank you very much. That happens all the time. Major companies have had that happen. Companies that have gone on to raise like $80 million have gotten funded through applying to MedTech Innovator, even without being selected to pitch. So apply, if I haven't already made that clear. Okay, here's the application. First thing you have to do, you're taken to this page that says, we want to get to know your product and other information. All you do here on the first page is tell us the name of your product. This cool product. Put the real name of the product there. You have to read our terms and conditions, which will open up separately. Check the little box and tell us which program you're applying to. So the pediatric program, the US program, or the Asia Pacific program. Now, you might want to apply to multiple programs, and that's just fine. You have to create a new application for each program because they're slightly different. I'm going to use the US program here. They're all pretty much the same in terms of the overall structure. Someone else asked, how much runway do you need to have to apply? You need enough runway to get through our program. So if our program is going to end in September of 2021 or October of 2021, you need to have runway to get through there. Or at least, I should say, I'll even take that back, just to get to your key milestone. Let's say you have a key milestone in July of next year, and you've got funding to achieve that, that's just fine too. We don't want you to run out of money in 2 months from now or 3 months from now, unless you have lined up investors who are committed, who said, hey, I'm gonna, Andrea, I'm gonna fund you. I've got everything, and you're just kind of closing those documents. We'll believe you and take your word for it. If you're like, look, I'm out of money, but we're literally about to close a round, that's just fine too. All right, the application is in 3 sections. Section 1, 2, and files. The first section here is information about your product. So again, the name of your product, which you can change if you need to, a short elevator pitch, literally 100 characters at most. Tell us, very briefly, we're a wearable remote monitoring garment that will alert you for congestive heart failure and disease management. That's super short. That tells us what you do. 100 words. Over here, you can give us 1 or 2 paragraphs, 1,400 characters maximum, on a summary about your product. If you have a video or URL, paste it over here. We love watching videos. If you have a password, put it in brackets to the right of the URL. Tell us what stage you're at in terms of development. Then the categorization. This is super important. We want to make sure that we know what you're doing. So we ask you for an overall category like devices or diagnostics or digital device or diagnostic device. You can check multiple boxes. You should see a little thing up here saying saved. Every time you do something, we save your application the whole time you're on. So every time you make a change, it's saved. You don't have to hit submit at the bottom. If you leave and come back, you're not going to lose anything. Patient journey. Tell us what step you are in the patient journey. You might say, I apply, my technology applies to prevention and detection, or my technology applies to detection and treatment decisions, or just detection, or just treatment, whatever it might be. Tell us where you apply in the patient journey. We also want to know, generally, in terms of solution areas, where do you kind of fit thematically? So for example, it might be infectious disease management. It might be population health. So tell us where you fit. Don't check every single box unless you really apply to all these categories. Special applications. Somebody asked about how I can indicate pediatrics. Well, number one, fill out a pediatric application. But number two, check the pediatric box. Even if you're applying to the regular US program, if you have a pediatric application, check the box. If your technology has military relevance, check that box. Then we ask you for clinical categories. We're going a little over time here, so hopefully you guys can stick around for a little bit. So we have a lead clinical category. So you tell us only one of these. What is the primary indication you are targeting? Now you might say, Paul, I have 4 indications I'm going after. I get it. You're not going to be able to enter the market most likely with 4 applications. You're probably going to pick one. Tell us the one that you're most likely to enter the market with. Colorectal surgery. Then you can say yes, but we also have applicability in cardiology. Check the colorectal surgery box again if you want, and nephrology. Whatever your application areas are. All right, I'm answering another question. If a company has 2 product lines with different value propositions, should we just focus on one of the products or both? Are we pitching the company or the device and product? I encourage you to fill out a separate application for each product that you want us to consider, meaning that you might have 3 products or 2 products. If you're currently developing both products, we're probably going to focus on one of them for MedTech Innovator. Try and guide your application to one product. I mean, unless they're very, very overlapping, in which case you can kind of describe them in one application. But otherwise, if they're 2 totally separate products, give us 2 applications. Focus on the one that you really want to focus on during our program. All right, these categories below, super important. If you're a device, what's your primary device category? We are disposable. If you're a diagnostic company, tell us what your primary diagnostic category is. We're point of care. Your digital, if you're digital, what is the primary digital category? By the way, you can do what I'm doing and you can fill all these out. We use AI, even though we're a disposable device, we have AI and it's designed to be used at the point of care. Or you might only check one of these radio buttons in a particular category. Below that, you'll see again a section for all of the areas that you really apply to. We want to know all the areas because again, we're going to match your application against expert reviewers and we want to make sure that they have a chance to see this. So yes, your primary is disposable, but all device categories, you're also not only disposable, but you're actually also a surgical tool. And maybe there's a biomaterial. If it was a diagnostic, yes, your point of care, but it's also a rapid point of care, or it uses imaging as well. All digital categories. If you're a digital component, which ones are applicable? Yeah, we use AI to do decision support. And we also have some healthcare IT in there as well. With a voice chat box for fun, chatbot. Okay, completed milestones and funding. This section over here, this is where we're going to talk about what you have already achieved and what you could achieve with your existing resources. This is very important. So not just completed, you can have things that are in progress here too. We want to know what series of fundings have you completed to date? I've done a pre-seed and a seed round, let's say. Or I've just had other meaning, other. Then down here it says, what's the most equity round that you've closed in millions? This is where we want you to type in, with decimal points, perhaps, the number of dollars, US dollars, that you have raised to date in equity. Again, if you've raised zero, we're not going to penalize you, but tell us zero. We want to see that zero, that it's a required field. If you've raised 2.5 million, type in 2.5. Don't type in million, because if you do, our system will complain and it'll put a little error message up saying most recent equity round close can only have number values without symbols, letters, or commas. Please correct that. We're not looking for million. We're looking for 2.5. We're not looking for 2,00,0,000. Our system will also complain. We're not looking for that. We want, if it's 2 million, we want a 2 in that field. We want to know the date when you close your most recent equity round. So if you've closed an equity round, you tell us, oh, I closed equity on 11/01/2020. Great. Total equity funding to date. So not just including the most recent round, but in total, you've raised $5 million or five, whatever you want to put in there, or zero if you didn't raise anything. Although if you tell us that you've most recently raised 2, but your total is 0, that's going to be a little confusing. Total non-dilutive funding. We want to know about grants you've gotten. So if you've gotten $1.5 million in non-dilutive funding previously, and academically, if you will, that's just fine. Again, no commas, no millions. Remaining operating runway. How long do you think you can last? I think I can last through Q4 2021. And as I mentioned, it's okay to say Q2 2021. If that's the remaining runway, tell us that. Don't lie just to get the application. We want to know, how long can you last? Because maybe we can help you. Then we want to know about your investor types. Who's invested in you? Oh, we've had an accelerator give us some money as well as some angels. Or maybe a family office gave you some money, or maybe it was friends and family and founders. Maybe it wasn't an accelerator. We got money from the founders and your friends and family. If you did, that's terrific. Just check the appropriate boxes. Again, we want to know who's been supporting you. We want to know the kinds of resources and networks you have at your disposal. We want to know significant sources of funding. These are really important. So you just put a little asterisk for each one of those, and you say self-funded, for example, or self-funded, and we are funded by Gates Foundation, and we are funded by RCT Ventures. That's the venture firm I used to work for. So you tell us that's who's funded us to date. Down below, we want to know what milestones you've already accomplished. So you see the example over here. We completed a 20-patient proof of concept study, and you tell us in brackets next to that when you completed it, Q1 2020, whatever. Hit return and enter another one. We hired a CEO in Q2, and so on. We want to know what milestones are achievable with your remaining resources. So meaning that you still have some money left over, and hey, with our existing resources, we can submit EUA for our device, or we can do a pre-sub meeting with FDA. And again, use that same quarter bracket format for each of these to tell us what else you can do with your existing resources. The section down below is exactly the same, except for what's coming up. We want to know how much funding you're seeking, again, in millions. We want to know what round you have open, meaning that we're raising a Series A now, or Series B now, or so on. When you think you'll close it, understanding, of course, that you can't predict the future, but generally speaking, we think in 2021, we're going to close that. That's really important because, as I mentioned earlier, if you're running out of cash, but you think you're going to close around in March, we want to know that. Most importantly, what milestones can you achieve? A pre-sub with FDA, and again, with the quarter 2021, hopefully. Or maybe we can achieve clinical validation in X patients, validation with 20 patients, and so on. Okay, referrals, we want to know if you've received funding from NIH. That's fine. If you have, tell us the grant number, as well as multiple. You can separate with the commas. If no, that's just fine too. We just want to know because we work with NIH. How did you hear about MedTech Innovator? That's a required field. Saw your info webinar, whatever. Or referred by alumni. Tell us, alumni, Dave, Matt Kessinger, who was our winner a couple of years ago. Or maybe you were referred by Lisa Samara, who was our winner this year. But if you were referred, please be honest about it. Did you previously apply? Yes or no? Yes, no. If yes, make sure you fill in the updates, some milestones that you've accomplished. We raised Series A since I last applied. Whatever. Okay, you finished. You click proceed to section 2. Section 2, by the way, you can jump around. You can do half of section 1, click the button at the top for section 2, and start section 2 early. You don't have to finish section 1 before you finish section or start section 2. Pretty nifty system. Value proposition. I mentioned that earlier. Tell us your unique value proposition. We believe we can reduce hospital admissions or hospital readmissions for patients who have survived a cardiovascular event by 50%. It's a pretty compelling value proposition. Or we believe we can reduce mortality in stroke by 25%. Whatever it is, tell us your value proposition. The healthcare economics, tell us financially, how is this going to impact the cost of care? If our solution is deployed universally, we believe we will save $2 billion a year in healthcare, or we will save $4,000 per procedure, whatever it is. Market opportunity. What's the problem you're solving? This is where you tell us, breast cancer is a massive problem, and we are specifically targeting biopsy in breast cancer, whatever your market opportunity is. And it's a problem that affects 1 million people per year in the US or worldwide. Market size, we want to know what's the overall market opportunity. So again, this is the numbers. It affects 1 million people per year. And a market of $3 billion or $50 million, whatever. Market access plan. This is where we want you to tell us the markets that you're planning to enter. Primary market, US, followed by Japan, followed by Thailand, wherever. That's what we want to know. We want to know your competitive advantage. Tell us 3 competitors here. If you don't know 3 competitors, you're not looking hard enough. 3 competitors in your space and what your competitive advantages are over them. And your advantage, we're first to market. We are early to market. We are a fast follower, or we are a last mover who has some advantage because we've got super mature, it's a mature market, but it's got new technology. Tell us about your IP. We've got a US provisional file, or we've got office actions. Freedom to operate. We've done our own search. We've used outside counsel, or we've done no search. Tell us about your team. List the key team members. Tell us, again, you can copy and paste from your executive summary. Formation. Tell us about the inspiration for your company. We met as residents and decided together on rotation that we saw a huge problem and that needed solving, and that's how we came together. Or we were sitting next to each other at a party, and I was telling the woman next to me about my invention, and she said, "Huh, I'm looking for a gig. I was the CEO of a medical device company, and boy, yours sounds really interesting. Tell us how you met." Diversity, and equity, and inclusion. This is very important to us. We want to understand your company leadership and founder diversity. Check all the appropriate boxes. We are a female-led company, meaning like your CEO or your president. We are a female-founded company. So maybe you don't have a female CEO, but you're a female founder or co-founder. Or BIPOC, Black, Indigenous, people of color, or other. So this is really important. There's a massive problem in health equity in our industry, both gender and economic and racial diversity. And we are looking to kind of get our handle on that. So tell us if you have diversity in your leadership. So let's say we have somebody who's a person of color who's leading our company. Diversity, equity, inclusion agenda status. So basically what we're asking for here is, how are you thinking about the problem of health disparities? As a company, you're advancing internal initiatives to improve diversity, equity, and inclusion, like, for example, management, understanding the needs of your employees. Or maybe you're not doing it. Don't check that box if you're not doing it. We're trying to basically survey people to see what they're doing. So don't tell us you're doing it if you're not. Product is designed for diversity, meaning that you are assessing and you are changing your core services or products to reduce disparities. So you're specifically trying to address health disparities. Maybe you're improving access. Maybe you're reducing pricing. Maybe you're showing diversity in your packaging materials. So it's not just a bunch of white people on your box. If you're doing that, check that box. If you're taking an active role to improve outcomes, including the social determinants of health in a virtual or geographic community. So you're literally going out and you're meeting with a local church and you're saying, hey, you should be using this technology. Check that box as an example. You're working with the community, maybe reaching out to patient advocates. Check that box. Ecosystem, including policy. That means that you're out there actively reflecting a diversity leadership agenda where you, using your policy, are trying to change the system, meaning that you might be selecting vendors. We're hiring a designer, and we're specifically going to hire one led by a Black leader. Or we are choosing a manufacturer, and we're choosing one that is led by a diverse founder, or maybe that is in a diverse ecosystem that will benefit from doing so. So again, you're trying to change the ecosystem. All right, last section's down here, regulatory. We want to know what best describes your product's pathway, 510K, de novo, PMA, etc. Maybe not applicable. If you're in the Asia Pacific program, you'll see different questions there. Somebody mentioned people of color cannot get funding in Europe. So I'm glad to hear that you mentioned DEI. It's interesting. It said, I switched with my husband, a person of color, so we can see whether a white woman has more chances to get somewhere. How interesting is that? Thank you for sharing that. Boy, let me tell you, we see things like this all the time. This is a major, major problem in our industry, and we are not alone. MedTech Innovator is out there working with our leaders at corporate partners, specifically companies like Johnson & Johnson and others. We are working on improving access to capital and access to resources for diverse founders. So I hear you. You shouldn't have to switch roles with your husband just to get funding, right? Okay, back to the application here. Which of the following best describes your product's Asia status? So even if you're a US company or a European company, we want to know what best describes your Asia strategy. You might not have an Asia strategy, and so you can click off not applicable. Or you could say we are preparing submission in an Asia region. And then down below, you can tell us where. What's the primary market? We're going to start in China, followed by Singapore, and so on. So please tell us about that. We just want to know if you have no Asia strategy, don't make up one. Just say not started or not applicable. U.S. regulatory status. Again, tell us the status. We've scheduled a pre-sub meeting. We're preparing our submission. We are FDA approved, or maybe it's not applicable. Okay, please select your European status. Same thing. We're preparing a submission. We're already CE marked, and so on. Other validations. Have you participated in other incubators? Yes, we were in TMCX in 2020, or we were in Startup Health in 2019. Whatever it might be, tell us, where else have you participated? Competitions, you might say, hey, we won the Global Innovator Challenge, or whatever it might be. And again, tell us the year, 2020, whatever it might be. Any significant partnerships. Now, this is not ones that you need to have to succeed. These are ones that you have. So again, this is something right here we want you to say, we have an active pilot with Kaiser Permanente. That would be great. Or we're about to start an active pilot with Kaiser Permanente. Someone asked about traction for before. Is your product generating revenue? Yes, it is. No, it's not. What's your revenue model or anticipated revenue? And check all the ones that apply. It's a single use, but also SaaS. Who's the customer for your product? Check all that apply. Now, we know you'll have multiple stakeholders, but you might say, hey, we're going to be paid by primarily by employers directly, or we're going to be paid directly by caregivers. Our product is for caregivers, etc. So you can check multiple boxes, hospitals, caregivers. That's the end of section 2. You can click the save button, or as I mentioned, this has been saved all the way through. You go to the 3rd tab here, finals. This is the final tab. Again, the name of your product, this cool product should appear at the top of the page. This is where you upload up files. You hit the select button and it'll let you choose a file to upload. Or you can just drag a file right into this box. Multiple files, in fact. These must be non-confidential. Very important, I'll repeat that. Non-confidential only. If you upload a slide deck and you say, oh, it's non-confidential, but in the corner, it says confidential in the corner, we are not going to look at it because our partners are not allowed to look at it. So we ask you, delete the word confidential on every slide from your slide master, PDF it, upload it to our system. Or just submit the PowerPoint. We take PowerPoints too. We support pretty much every presentation format. Please, non-confidential only. If you say, well, there's something that I can't put in my presentation then, that's fine. Tell us what you can tell us. Non-confidential. Wait for the information to be uploaded. You will then see it appear here where it says uploaded files once it's finished doing that. As soon as you've done that, you can hit continue, or you can go to the final page here, which is review and submit. On this page, you will re-see your application down below, including anything you've filled out. So all the things that we've just been doing together, our completed milestones, our active pilot with KP, and so on. All of that you should see here. If something is wrong, you can go back and fix it. The formatting may be a little bit off, like these will be broken up into separate lines. We're trying to keep it short in the display here. The final version that the reviewers will see looks different than this. But again, here's all the categories you selected, the boxes you checked, your contact information, and so on. There will be a little thing over here either saying your status is complete and ready to submit, and a button that says submit, or there'll be warnings like you see here that say your innovator profile is complete and company is complete, but section 1 is missing a short description, a summary, and a development stage. So you can click this little button here to go back and fill those in. Section 2, you're missing your need, your value proposition, and team expertise. These are the required fields only. Some fields are not required. Thank you for joining to the person who had to leave. Okay, lastly, if there's a file attached, you'll see it over here. And that's it. You hit submit, you're all done, and we will get in touch with you to tell you the status. All right, I've gone over, but I think we covered a lot. Any final questions here for anyone who's still on? Thank you. Happy to meet some of you guys today. Even if not seeing you on the screen, I appreciate all your questions. All right, so that's it. I think we've covered everything. Again, January 15th is the deadline, but do not wait until January 15th. Do not wait until January 14th to submit your application. If you have the time, go fill it out right now. You can always update it later, hit submit. And the reason I keep saying that is our partners are starting to look at applications right now. They're literally going in the system, reviewing applications, and they're clicking little buttons that say, I want to see that company pitch. There's only so many companies that get to pitch. So the sooner you get your application in, the more priority you're going to have to actually present. So please submit your application soon. I know there's a lot of information. Luckily, you can come back and kind of fill it out over different sessions. You don't have to do it all in one shot. When you log back in, you can access the information again, and you can add an employee. They'll get the opportunity to submit to the application as well, to update it, and they'll be notified together. So you'll actually both be getting emails when we start notifying you about things. So add other people to help with the application as needed. We find that really helps. If you have co-founders, please add them to the application. Again, I think we've covered everything. US program, Asia Pacific program are effectively same timelines. So, we have a couple extra weeks in Asia Pacific. Your deadline is the end of January. But overall, pretend it's January 15th and get the application done. And that's it. We have different partners in the Asia Pacific program. We also work with Siemens Healthineers in the Asia Pacific program. We also work with Align Technology, the dental company, in our Asia Pacific program. We have others who we work with that aren't part of the US program. So that's also a nice benefit as well, as working with Enterprise Singapore and other organizations as well in Asia Pacific. So again, thank you for your time today. I'm looking forward to seeing your application. Please join us. If you can, please join us at our cybersecurity webinar this Thursday. Again, medtechinnovator.org/live. If you apply, we will continue. If you even start filling out an application, we will start sending you notifications. So you'll get updates on timing as well. So that's it. Looking forward to seeing your application. Thank you very much for listening today, and I hope to see you in MedTech Innovator 2021. Have a great day.